Your gut controls way more than you might think. Your digestion, your immune system, your cravings, your mood, even how likely you are to be diagnosed with a chronic disease. And if you're feeling bloated, tired, have brain fog, or you're always craving junk, that's your gut's way of saying that it's out of balance. Maybe you've been told you need to take a probiotic, or you should cut out the gluten, or that you suddenly have a whole variety of new food allergies. But the truth is, there could be a bunch of different things going on. So by the end of this video, we're gonna cover 3 really important topics around your gut. First, we're going to go through the different parts to your gut microbiome and why each of them matter when it comes to your health. Second, for those of you that are looking to fix or optimize your gut health, I'm going to walk you through a 5-step plan that'll help you diagnose exactly where you're at and then what you can do about it. And third, I'm going to walk you through some really interesting ways that your gut influences your brain, your immunity, your metabolism, and even your sleep in some ways you probably haven't heard before. All of this is especially important now as we see more and more people living in a world that's filled with ultra-processed foods, environmental toxins, and over-sanitation. Our guts are under attack and they are being destroyed faster than ever. And some of it's happening from some sources we'll cover here that people completely overlook. On a societal level, the healthcare costs are piling up, but on an individual level, it's also just really uncomfortable when your gut is feeling off. I fixed my own gut after years of bloating, inflammation, and intense cravings. And now I've seen a lot of my clients reverse their daily bloating, get sick far less often, and even improve their mood and their mental clarity simply by optimizing their internal ecosystem. The research is very clear on this. When you heal your gut, you improve your health across the board. All right, we're gonna treat your gut like a garden. And like any garden, there's a sequence when you're trying to bring it back to life. First, you need to assess where you're at and take stock of the garden. Second, you wanna remove the harmful bacteria or the overgrowth. So you wanna pull out the weeds. Third, you wanna repair your actual gut lining. That's like tilling the soil. Fourth, you wanna repopulate your gut with beneficial bacteria. That's like planting the seeds. And then fifth, you want to reinforce the health of your gut with proper food and lifestyle choices. And that is like watering and fertilizing your garden regularly. If you skip any of these steps or you go in the wrong order, you can actually make things worse, especially if you're dealing with a small intestinal bacterial or fungal overgrowth. So let's break down each step, and I'll start by helping you figure out exactly where you're at. Let's start with a really quick but crazy story. In 2014, it was a guy named Dr. Jeff Leach that wanted to rewild his gut after years of damage that he had accumulated from the Western lifestyle. His method was something that most of us would consider unthinkable. He literally performed a DIY fecal transplant. But it wasn't just from anybody. He got the fecal matter from a Hadza tribesman, one of the few hunter-gatherer tribes left in the world in Tanzania. And they have extremely low rates of modern chronic diseases. Yes, a blender was involved, and yes, it worked. I'm not here to tell you need to go blend up somebody else's shit and put it in your body.
Oh, thank God.
But his results prove something powerful. Your microbiome can change dramatically in just a couple of weeks if you give it the right inputs. All right, let's get into step 1, your self-assessment, to figure out where you're at. Before you start pulling weeds or planting seeds, you need to know the current state of your garden. So I'd recommend grabbing a pen or just using your hand or making a mental note to tally each of the following 7 questions that you answer yes to. Question number 1, do you get bloated after most meals? Question number 2, do you find yourself constantly craving sugar or processed carbohydrates? Question number 3, do you run into brain fog or find yourself with low energy in most afternoons? Question number 4, have you been on antibiotics in the last year? Question number 5, do you get sick often or do you take a long time recovering from colds? Question number 6, do you have any skin issues like acne, eczema, or rashes? And question number 7, do you have any digestive issues? Things like uncomfortable poops or diarrhea or even constipation. If you said yes to 3 or more of those, you're probably dealing with some degree of gut dysbiosis or an imbalance of the microbes that live in your microbiome. It could mean low diversity. It could mean too many of certain bacteria that can be harmful. It could mean a damaged gut lining, or it could mean all of the above. So step number 2 is to help you remove a microbe overgrowth or weed the garden. Because a small intestinal bacterial or fungal overgrowth can turn normally healthy foods like fiber or fermented foods into fuel for the wrong microbes. Common signs of this involve constant bloating, sugar cravings, brain fog after meals, or even really foul-smelling gas. And if this sounds like you, there's a couple key tools you might want to consider. The first is a short-term elimination diet. You might want to consider something like a low FODMAP diet or even a carnivore-style diet. And what this is going to do is help you starve off some of that overgrowth. This is also the time to potentially use some targeted herbal remedies like oregano oil, berberine, or garlic extract. Each of these is antimicrobial, so they can help bring down an overgrowth if you have too much of a certain type of bacteria. The last thing you might want to consider here is intermittent fasting, because when you give your gut breaks from food, you're also forcing the microbes in your gut to rebalance their populations. A pro tip here is if you feel like you have an overgrowth, get a breath test done before you start loading up on fiber, fermented foods, or probiotics, because none of those are going to fix the problem if you have too many weeds in your garden. Step number 3 is to repair your gut lining, or to till and prepare the soil of your garden. Your gut lining is only 1 cell thick. Just imagine this is like having a coffee filter between your intestines and your bloodstream. And if that barrier gets damaged, which it can from many things, you end up with something called leaky gut, where undigested food particles, toxins, and even microbes can sneak into your bloodstream, triggering your immune system and ultimately chronic inflammation. And your gut lining, even though it's so thin, is protected by a mucus layer. So certain healthy bacteria in your gut, they're actually producing mucus to protect that fragile single cell layer. When you lose those bacteria or you let the mucus dry out, your gut lining is exposed. So there are certain mucus producing bacteria here, like Akkermansia, that can be especially helpful for protecting your gut lining. Here are a couple things you can do to repair your gut lining and stimulate mucus production. The first is to drink some daily bone broth, which is rich in collagen and the amino acids that your body needs to repair the lining itself. You may even want to consider supplementing with something like L-glutamine, which is an abundant amino acid that helps your body repair the gut lining and also provides fuel for your intestinal cells. You could also consider supplementing with something like zinc carnosine, which can help reduce gut inflammation and speed up the healing process. There are certain oils too that can help you feed bacteria like Akkermansia so that they're producing more mucus to protect that lining. So something like clove oil in small doses can be helpful. And during this phase, you really want to try and avoid irritants. So alcohol, ultra-processed foods, artificial sweeteners, raw plant foods, and definitely unnecessary antibiotics or NSAIDs. In step 4, you're going to repopulate the gut with beneficial bacteria. This is where you're actually laying the seeds down in your garden. But this can only happen once you've cleared space for them and repaired the soil. And this is where probiotics come in. Those are those live beneficial bacteria that can help balance out the different populations of microbes you have in your microbiome and help train your immune system. There are 3 different biotics that you need to know terms for. The first is probiotics, which is what we just mentioned. Those are the actual live bacteria themselves. The second is prebiotics. Those are the indigestible fibers that actually provide food for the bacteria. And these include fibers like inulin, resistant starch, and pectin, things you'll find in abundance in certain fruits and vegetables. And third are postbiotics. These are the compounds that the bacteria actually produce in response to eating foods. You can think of them like hormones or chemical messengers, and they include short-chain fatty acids like butyrate that help lower inflammation, they protect your gut lining, and they can even improve your brain health. So the best food sources for getting probiotics and prebiotics so that they can produce postbiotics are fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh, miso, raw cheeses, dairy, and yogurt, and even kombucha if it doesn't have too much sugar in it. On top of that, all of those foods have live microbes in them. So when you eat them, you're providing your body with those microbes so that they can become part of that ecosystem. And on top of that, that's when it can be helpful to add some diverse plant fibers. That may be different forms of legumes if you can tolerate them, nuts, seeds, fibrous vegetables and fruits. And there's even data to suggest that connective tissue from animal protein can help feed your gut. Last but not least is step number 5. You want to reinforce the health of your gut with food and lifestyle choices. And this is where you continually water and fertilize the garden. Here's a quick checklist that'll help you keep your gut healthy long term. The first is to try to eat somewhere between 10 to 20 different plant foods per week. Diversity of fibers feeds diversity of bacteria. The second is to try and eat some form of fermented food every single day, because that will help you continuously populate your gut microbiome with these beneficial microbes that are so important to your health. You may also want to consider adding more herbs and spices into your diet. Things like Ceylon cinnamon, turmeric, rosemary, thyme, and a whole host of others that provide polyphenols or antioxidants that actually feed and nourish a lot of these healthy microbes. Another underrated way to promote a healthy gut microbiome is to spend more time outdoors. And this is especially important for kids. Spending time in gardens, in forests, even sitting down and laying in the grass, as long as it hasn't been treated with pesticides. All of this helps boost your microbial exposure, which is a good thing. You want to be exposed to microbes in your environment because they are what help train your immune system. Even having a pet has been correlated with having a healthier microbiome because that pet is naturally bringing in bacteria and other microbes that expose your body to them. Last but not least, you want to avoid over-sanitation. I get it, if you go to a gas station rest stop, you definitely want to wash your hands, probably don't want to touch the door handle on the way out, but you don't necessarily want to be smothering your hands in Purell all the time. Your immune system needs microbial exposure and training. So if you're constantly using soaps and shampoos and hand sanitizer that kills 99.9% of bacteria, you may be inadvertently making your immune system weaker. Listen, most people know when their gut is off because they're dealing with bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. But sometimes the warning signs are much more subtle, and you might not even think to connect them to your microbiome. So here are some surprising ways that your gut impacts your health. And pay attention as we go through these, because these are often things that fly under the radar, but they're still areas that can indicate you might have a slight gut imbalance. Your gut and your brain are intricately connected. In fact, your gut makes roughly 90% of the serotonin that's produced in your body. Serotonin is your feel-good, happy hormone. It's what makes you feel content and relaxed. Your gut microbiome also helps your body produce neurotransmitters like dopamine and GABA, which are key for staying motivated and also being able to remain calm. So your gut is intricately connected to your mental health. And in one study, researchers even found that when they implanted rats with bacteria from humans that were depressed, the rats started showing depressed behaviors. Without changing their diet or environment, it was only the microbes that were impacted. Another key factor to your gut that we've mentioned a couple times is the connection to your immune system. Roughly 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. And a diverse microbiome acts almost like an immune library. So all the different microbes act almost like books that can better inform your immune system when it's facing a friend or an enemy. People with higher gut microbiome diversity tend to get sick less often, they recover faster from infections, and they even respond better to modern treatments like vaccines. And that's why the gut is also intricately linked to inflammation and chronic pain. Certain gut bacteria can either trigger or calm down inflammation throughout your body. And when your gut microbiome is imbalanced, oftentimes it leaves your immune system in an alarm mode. So it fuels joint pain, headaches, and even flare-ups for people with autoimmune conditions. Researchers have found that people with conditions like rheumatoid arthritis often have distinct microbiome imbalances, and that restoring some of their gut health and that diversity can actually reduce their symptoms. The gut also has a huge impact on your blood sugar management and your metabolism. Check this study out. In 2015, researchers in Israel used continuous glucose monitors to collect over 1.5 million data points. Then they looked at roughly 100 different variables for each of the participants. And the single biggest factor that determined whether or not somebody's blood sugar spiked in response to certain foods wasn't from the carbs or the sugar or the calories. It was the composition of their gut microbiome. And this helps explain why two people can eat the same exact meal, and then one ends up gaining a couple pounds, whereas the other doesn't really feel an impact. This has nothing to do with willpower. Your gut microbiome also influences your cardiovascular health. An excess of certain gut bacteria can produce a harmful compound called TMAO, trimethylamine N oxide, and it produces this from certain foods like meat and eggs. High TMAO levels are linked with plaque buildup in arteries and higher risk for heart attacks and strokes. But here's the really interesting thing. On the flip side, there are beneficial bacteria that help your body synthesize and break down cholesterol and even reduce blood pressure. So one person may respond completely differently when they eat eggs and meat versus another person. If you watch this channel often, you know I'm always beating this drum. Everybody's different, so the lifestyle that leads you to optimal health is going to be different than it is for somebody else. Last but not least, your gut microbiome plays a huge role in your sleep and your recovery. And that's partially because the microbes in your gut, they also have a circadian rhythm. So they influence the circadian rhythm that you feel, that internal clock that you have that influences when you're awake and when you're asleep. Having poor gut diversity has been linked with fragmented sleep and slower recovery, especially after illness or exercise. Hopefully now you know your microbiome is running the show. For your digestion, your immunity, your metabolism and mood, your cardiovascular health, and ultimately, your longevity. But the good news is, your gut is a garden. You can weed it, you can seed it, and you can feed it. But the speed and the order in which you do things matters. Every day that you feed the weeds or starve off the flowers, your garden is going to be shifting for better or for worse. So here's a 5-part quick start guide for gut health. Number 1 is to remove as much plastic and non-stick cookware from your kitchen as possible. Number 2 is to cut back on ultra-processed foods and avoid over-sanitation. And number 3 is to add more herbs, spices, and plant variety to your diet, as long as you don't have an overgrowth. Number 4 is to try intermittent fasting a couple days a week. And number 5 is to buy organic or to make sure you're washing your foods very thoroughly. And as a bonus, I just want to remind you, if your gut responds poorly to fiber or fermented foods, go get a hydrogen breath test to see if you have an overgrowth. My name's Andrew. I'm a personal trainer, nutrition coach, and I'm the founder of Longevity Lifestyle. If this video helped you out, subscribe to the channel so that I can make more of these. I appreciate you for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.